Good. Welcome to this morning's webinar on inventory management. Myself, Amy Toner, and Darren Schulte are your hosts. This morning, Darren will provide the presentation. Just a few notes. Our lines are muted. You can submit questions via the chat section, and Darren will answer them at the end. Also, this presentation is being recorded and will be posted on our website in the calendar section. Now, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Darren.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. Let's get started. So a couple things in the introduction. What are we going to learn today? Simple three things. Why inventory management is important to your profitability, to improve your inventory turns, and the good, the bad, and the ugly of Truckstop inventory. Why is inventory important? Well, for most of you on the phone today, you know it's money, and it's more important than ever not to waste it. Cost of business is rising at an alarming rate. Fuels are beginning to depress. I'm sure each of you have heard either on the news or in your blogs that you read, in the emails and so forth, newspapers, that retail shutters, bankruptcies, store closings, and so forth are happening as frequently today as during the last depression in 2009. So more importantly, it might be that trucks, who are our core customers, are stopping less frequently. There's many reasons for that: improved mileage, Pony Express models, trailer drops, and so forth. The abandoning by a lot of the fleets of the first and the last mile, turning them over to box trucks and vehicles that are less than 27 feet in length. Less miles being driven in general for over the drivers, and the true owner-operators continue to shrink. It's even more critical than it might have been ever in our history of running travel centers and truck stops to really get an understanding of what our inventory is and how it's really truly performing. So let's start talking about how we start getting inventory under control. And the first thing to do is to understand about categorization of your merchandise. It's critical to try to break your merchandise into categories. Now, if you on the call will say, well, Darren, what should I do? Should I have 10 categories? Should I have 20? Should I have 15? What's the magic number? And as I share with everyone during my store visits, number is the number that you're going to use. And I say that is it makes no sense to spend a lot of money on a super expensive system, a back office system that breaks down all of your categories, even down to the subcategory level, if you're not going to utilize that data. So if you have the ability to break your inventory down, say, for example, into 10 major categories, and you're going to start looking at that information on a regular basis, that number is good for you. If you have the resources, if you're a larger organization, if you have category management teams, if you have buyers, if you have analysts, well, then you have potentially the ability to break it down even further. But even the larger organizations, we always stress, are you using that data? Because just as you're tracking the data, just because you're gathering the data, it doesn't help you unless you're utilizing the data. So I want to emphasize it's important your inventory broken down into categories, but even more important than that is if you do that, utilize the information and don't make it so complicated that yourself, your app managers, or store managers can't utilize the information that's being provided to them. Why is categorization of products important? Well, a lot of you have a lot of different vendors providing you with a lot of different merchandise, and in many times a lot of similar merchandise. So let's just use the category of chips. Let's say you have 5 vendors that are bringing in chips into your store, and you are listing, and let's say one of those chip vendors happens to also bring in apparel for you. So he brings in chips and apparel. And if you're not breaking down the merchandise that's coming into a category, you may be having, as an example, apparel merchandise being dropped into your chip from an invoice standpoint. And when you look at your performance, you may say, wow, I'm really doing well in my snack category. It's not turning that much. And that might be because you've got other products that don't belong in the category. You got apparel products or you got cookies or whatever it may be. Many of our vendors bring in multiple different types of merchandise. That's not uncommon. So whether you're using McLean or DAS or Linco or Comark or Hackney, it's critical to understand how that merchandise it looks on the invoice and you're breaking it down into a category. So this is categorization of products. We've got single store operators that have very, very robust programs, and we have chains and larger regional players that have robust categorization of products. Most people, large, small, are trying to practice some sort of categorization of their products. So just because you're a single store operator doesn't mean that you cannot not categorize your products. So don't be frightened of it. As I mentioned earlier, what's the correct amount of categories? Well, the correct amount of categories, again, is the categories that you're going to physically look at, that you're going to take the time to analyze again, yourself, your manager, your CAP manager, who's ever doing the buying, who's ever looking at the P&L. Make sure it's, again, something you're going to do. There really isn't a magic number. Again, there are people that take a category, they break it down to a subcategory, then they break it down to a micro category. You break it down to the number of categories that you feel comfortable with and that you can take action on. The key thing to understanding inventory control, just like shrink control on our last webinar, is execution, taking action on what you're looking at. How can I practice categorization within my small staff? Again, as I referenced, you just take a look at the different types of products you have in your store. You've got apparel, you've got gifts, you've got electronics, you've got truck supply, you've got grocery. So at a minimum, you may say, well, I've got a very small staff. There's absolutely no way I can break my categories down to everything that I need to break it down. So let's break it down into lumps. So maybe it's truck supply and electronics. It's gift, novelty, toy, and souvenir, apparel. It's grocery, and then maybe it's non-grocery products, and maybe it's beverage, and if you carry a beer, maybe it's just alcohol, something to that extent. Again, it doesn't have to be exceptionally detailed, just a starting point to identify what's coming into your store by the broadest terms of your categories. If you have a small staff, use vendors to help you. You, the vendor community, most vendors want to help you. So tell them, share with them that you're looking to break down your categories. You're looking to get a better understanding of your inventory, so it also helps them. So talk with them about, how your invoices are coming in, and do they have the ability to maybe to break up their invoice a little bit differently so it spells out the different categories. Work in conjunction with them. The beer vendors, a lot of the soda vendors, a lot of the truck supply vendors, grocery store vendors can be incredibly helpful in this process. So don't start down this road about really improving your inventories without getting your vendors involved. Also, it's important for them to understand what you're doing, because naturally they're selling into your business. And if they don't understand what you're doing, they may fight you on it. And they're not fighting you on it because they're bad people. They just don't understand what's going on. So the more you get your vendors involved with what you're trying to accomplish when it comes to categorization of products and inventory management, the more success you're going to have. So again, it's very important for you to know how often you're turning things. Now we're moving to turns. It's critical that you understand when you've categorized your merchandise, you've got your merchandise number in there, and how often are you turning it, okay? How often are you moving that merchandise? That's critically important to understand. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but why that's important to understand is if you have large electronic sets, you may not necessarily turn those sets as frequently as you would the chips. Look at the gross margin dollar production of those inventory sets, for example, on the electronics, it may produce a significant amount more dollars in an annual basis than chips would. So you have to do some balancing. You have to, again, understand what is turning and what is that important to you. So on the side, if you're carrying, let's say, a huge inventory on gifts, novelties, let's say you're carrying $1 million worth of inventory in gifts and novelties and toys, and you're only selling $1 million a year, You may say, wow, that's a lot of money, but in reality, I'm selling $1 million and I got to buy another $1 million, just to sit in my store to keep my sales up. That may not be something that's, successful for you. You may not want to tie up $1 million worth of inventory, even though it's generating $1 million in sales. So there has to certainly be some balance when it comes to looking at your turns and looking at your merchandise. So let's chat some turns. Here's some simple ways to improve your turns. These are very, very simple ways. There are numerous more, I would say, detailed things you can do and more difficult things to do. But right from the beginning, there's some really, really simple things. So in store, take a category, something specific within that category. So for example, you go ahead and grab a bag of M&M, large bag of M&M nuts, one of those take-home sealable packages, and walk around your location and note all the similar products in that category. You have too many of that similar product. In other words, do you have the sealable large bag of M&M plain, the sealable large bag of M&M mint, the sealable large bag of M&M nuts, on and on and on? Do you have too many of that? And while you're doing that, look at your pricing. Look at, are there similar things within that same set? They're basically exactly the same. They're the same size, the same take-home package, and yet their retails are all over the board. Do you have an opportunity to clean that up while you're looking at your inventories when you're doing a category walk around? Another simple example, category, again, something specific within that category, and look for exact products. So now you're not just looking at similar products, you're looking at exact products. How many iPhone 6 chargers do you need in your store? Do you need 4 vendors delivering an iPhone 6 charger? If your answer to me is yes, I do, my pushback then would be to you, well, at least make sure they're all the same retails. So it gives you an opportunity to look at, do you have massive amounts of exact products with all sorts of different prices, but think through, again, the logistics of that. Now you're dealing with 4 vendors versus 1 vendor. You've got 4 invoices to deal with. You've got 4 checks to cut. And I'm not saying that you should carry 4 different vendors. I'm asking you to challenge yourself, and do you really need, again, to have so much exact products from different types of people with all different types of costs and retails? Don't forget to look closely at what you're offering. In some cases, you probably know this from your Frito-Lay vendor. You'll see that the Frito-Lay vendor sells Matador beef jerky produced by Jack Links. And there are many vendors that are doing that exact same thing. They're actually reselling a that's delivered in many cases by another vendor or produced by another vendor. So many times you're paying additional costs and carrying additional merchandise that you already have in your store. So again, look closely through that stuff. See who's delivering stuff that you're already getting from somewhere else. And again, broadly, it could be beef jerky, it could be pens, it could be batteries, just very broadly through that. And these types of things, again, in most cases will help get a better control and understanding what you have in your store. The last thing that you all can see on the web here today is take a category, something specific with a category, and look at all the similar similar product in that category that have different sizes and different prices. We kind of talked a little bit about pricing, but do you need to carry 35-cent gum in your store? Have you sat down and realized how expensive it is to put concrete in your locations? It's real expensive. And for interstate locations, do you need to carry, for example, a 35-cent gum? I mean, you do or you don't. My challenge to you when it comes, again, to understanding turns and profitability that those turns are producing for you, but importantly, your gross margin return on inventory invested. So the money you're spending, the dollars that inventory that you have in your store, what is it producing from a gross margin dollar standpoint? Does it make sense to carry 35-cent gum? Just a challenge. Move the turns. This information in front of you is just a picture from CSP did a nice article about heat maps. And just very, very quickly, turns can be impacted by where you place merchandise in your store. That's really also incredibly important to understand. Most of us in our industry, the first thing that we do on our counter is we'll put 25-cent and 35-cent change makers. My challenge to you is if your counter is going to be one of the most heavily visited spots in your store, why not put Godiva chocolate up there, for whatever it is, or why not put things that will really truly generate some gross margin dollar production for your operation. Things to think about it in heavily walked areas is, can you put cellular chargers? Can you put sunglasses in prime positions where both truck drivers and your car customers see it? If you have a strong demographic for female customers, could you put purses up front, on an end cap versus a chips? All sorts of different things, different ways to look at your store where you place merchandise. And maps are very easy to do, ladies and gentlemen. You do not need to spend a lot of money. This is how simple a heat map is to do. You basically take a piece of paper, draw your store out in stick fashion, and then 3 times a day, just highlight how people are walking into your store. 3 times a day, so do a morning, maybe do a lunch time, and then a dinner, and do it all 7 days. It's important to do it all 7 days because it's very possible that your Friday, Saturday, and Sunday customers visit your store or shop your stores differently. It's not expensive to do. You don't need to spend a tremendous amount of money. So again, get a simple piece of paper, get some color markers, put your store out in stick form and fashion, and just simply mark, how people walk in your store. Take 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes during your busiest times, 3 times a day, 7 days a week, and that'll give you a good indication. So what you see in the next slide is just a different version, a different story on this actual heat map. Again, you can see in this particular location how people are entering this business. It's interesting to see in this particular store, you see all the blue and all the cold area. People are not making it back to the beverage coolers. People are not making it to the fountain. And this particular one you're looking at, the vast majority of the action at this store is all up at the front. A lot of us think, if we put something into the back, a customer is going to be going back there. You can really damage your turns by not understanding how people come in and out of your store. So again, if you put stuff in the back and you assume they're going to go look for it, they may or may not be doing that in your particular location. One of the examples is many of us use prime valuable space right up front for items that are need items. Need items are things that we need. So for example, if you need an additive, you're going to go get that additive. And I would challenge you, why would you put take a primary position in your store and put additives right in the front? Just so think really long, hard. Again, that doesn't mean you can't put displays up there. That doesn't mean that you can't have additives up there. But if you do some heat maps, which you're seeing in front of you, real simple heat maps, how people are coming in and out of your store can help determine where you place that merchandise, and this can in turn help improve turns. The one, the larger of our store, and again, you can see all those blue areas within that store. That's cold. That means essentially people are not making it to those areas. So again, you have the latest and greatest thing that was delivered by McLean, or the latest and greatest thing that was delivered by DS, or Highway, or Linco, or whoever your vendor is, and it doesn't sell. Okay, well, it doesn't sell because you've placed it in an area where nobody goes. So sometimes it's not bad merchandise. Sometimes it's bad merchandise placement. All right, getting on to the good, the bad, and the ugly of Truckstop inventory. So what inventory? Okay, I'm not going to read through all of this. You guys have copies of these slides you can get, and you can see. Essentially, good inventory, productive inventory is stuff that sells, okay? It produces strong gross margin dollars. Emphasize strong gross margin dollars because a lot of times someone will say, wow, this item is making me 60% profit. It's a great thing, and it's producing you 10 cents profit. Gross dollars, ladies and gentlemen, is what we take to the bank. Gross margin dollars is how we pay our bills. gross and dollars are critical. So not always about that I'm making great penny profit. You all the time penny profit, penny profit. I'm going to tell you that gross margin dollars pays the bills. And when you're looking to reduce your net operating costs, when you're looking to make your stores more profitable with fuel, you have to take money to the bank. And that's not to say that penny profits are not important. It's not to say that, percent is not important. It is to say, again, that gross margin dollars is what, in my opinion, is critical. So, in a perfect world, our stores would be full of all good merchandise and good and productive inventory. That's what we're striving for. But that's pretty much impossible because there are some situations, which we're going to talk about in just a second, where you have to carry certain merchandise to be in the business. You can have one screwdriver and hammer and say you have a tool set. You can't just have one Snickers bar and one Reese's and say you're in the candy business. So there are times where you have to make a determination in order to create a full set. I'm going to have some stuff potentially in my store that isn't the most productive or the best selling, but I have to create a set. If I don't, having just a single item of this or that is probably not going to produce the dollars I need it to do, okay? So I would say when you read through this, the most important thing is when you analyze your profitability of productive inventory or what you think is productive inventory, make sure that you really include all the true costs. That's one of our things we do frequently. We say, oh, it's free freight. There's no freight, ladies and gentlemen. Stuff is not free. So make sure that you understand what is the true cost of the merchandise that's coming into your store. And I'll understand how often do you have to move that. So like when a soda vendor may come in and say they want you to have all this new inventory, understand the cost of all that new inventory. Now you've got one space taken away from your top sellers. You're going to have to replace your top sellers more frequently. You're in cooler stocking it more frequently. You've got to move that inventory back and forth. You have slips and falls that take place in injuries, back injuries in the cooler. So think through all of those different types of things. What is the real true cost of that merchandise? It's just the cost that shows up on your invoice. And those of you that take the time to start really understanding that, those of you that do that will be the ones that are really becoming very, very, very successful. So unproductive inventory. Again, this is inventory that essentially does not provide a return on your investment. In many cases can contribute to some sales. What I was talking about earlier about the one screwdriver or the one hammer or the Snickers bar and the Reese's bar. Maybe times where you have merchandise in your store that isn't the most productive, but you need to have it in your store. In other words, if you're going to be in the apparel business, you're going to have some apparel. You're going to have to make a statement. If you're going to be in the craft beer business, you're going to have some craft beers for your customers to see, okay? Most of us old-timers and a lot of the new-timers view that, the unproductive merchandise is merchandise that you have to have. It's kind of the cost of doing business. And you don't have those types of things in your store, you're never really going to generate those true dollars that some of our travel centers do. In other words, someone who's really got super tight inventory, is not offering any types of solutions, is probably going to be hard pressed to generate $3,000 a day in retail sales off 1,000 customers. For someone who has more selections, even though, again, I'm not saying that this is somewhat contradictory, but that you should have inventory from everything, but it has some selections, it has much larger opportunity to hit $30,000 in retail sales out of 1,000 customers than, again, if you just had one hammer, one screwdriver as a tool set, and Reese's and Snickers in your candy set. So productive inventory, it's important that you understand the cost of this, understand the cost of doing business. It's very, very, very critical. Last one, of course, is the ugly, and that's the unproductive inventory. There is one more that's worse, but ugly and unproductive inventory really is stuff that's not making your operation any profit, period, okay? You really have to think long and hard before investing in this merchandise. A lot of us do that. A lot of us will say, well, my gift inventory is turning XXXX, but when you really analyze it, the majority of your gift inventory sales and profitability are coming out of the old 20-80 rule, or 80-20 rule, 80% of your profits out of 20% of your merchandise. So you really have to take a look at, ugly and unproductive inventory. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating for your vendors. It's frustrating for your store managers and your buyers. But those of you that take on this task to go through your store and say, look, I have not sold any of this merchandise in last year, that's stuff that you really, or maybe not any, because that would be dead inventory, which we're going to talk about, but, very little of it, 1 or 2 or 3 in a year, that's, those tough decisions. And again, not understanding your categories will lead to these types of problems. Understanding that maybe your gift novelty is turning at 25 times a year, that's because you've got beverage sales in your numbers. That beverages are turning 30 plus times a year, and your gift novelty is only turning 1 time a year. But when you get your P&L, you think, whoa, my turns are pretty good. So I guess that if you're already losing money, just add the other true costs, like we talked to the equation, and bad inventory even gets worse. So when it's not producing profit for you, and then you start really understanding all the other pieces, and you start adding to it, okay? Like you may have dead inventory that doesn't go through your register, okay, but being stolen or being used as a theft mechanism by your cashiers, all of that inventory is even worse because it's just sitting there and it's being stolen. So or you're having to use labor to move it around all the time in order to try to figure out how to sell it. So those types of things are incredibly costly to you. Last one is dead inventory. Well, this is just dead. And the only way it walks out of your store is being stolen. This is the walking dead, and trust me, it's not walking. It's stuck to store and it's dead. This stuff you have to be brave about. This is not the stuff you package up after a Christmas holiday in a box and put it to the next year. This merchandise you got to get rid of. And be creative in how you get rid of it. Maybe you can give it away with a purchase of a fuel. Maybe you can go down to the local school that needs this types of merchandise, or the local shelter. There are other ways potentially from a tax deduction or donation that you can do. But don't do that in your store. There are many of us in our industry. We carry dead inventory for years. If we get it picked up by the vendor, we're like, oh, this is no good, and I'm just going to keep it, and hopefully through osmosis, and I'll be able to let my customers know I have it way in the back in a box, and they'll come and ask me for it. So it's dead merchandise. It's truly dead. Get it out of your store. And again, this is stuff that could create frustration for your vendors. You may have to tell your bud vendor, hey, I know you come in and you change out the bud all the time because it goes bad. It passes its pass date, but that's bad inventory. Just because you're getting credits on something doesn't make it a good inventory. A lot of people will tell me, well, they guarantee the merchandise. Well, that doesn't mean anything. If it's still sitting in your store and it's just being picked up, maybe it's not costing you per se money to get it picked up, but time and energy and wasted space in your store. So think long and hard about dead inventory and get it out of your store. Okay, in conclusion, so again, inventory is money. You're having it in your bank, earning interest, and sitting in your shelves gathering dust. When you go into your store tomorrow, on Friday, I want you to look through your store and look at it as dollar bills. Because it is. It's money. Turns are critical for creating profitability. If strong turns improve your gross margin return on inventory and cash flow. Gross margin return on inventory invested helps reduce your net operating costs. Having that turning store, having products that produce good gross margin dollars, all your store it gives your store the ability to survive when our margins continue to depress. Hopefully some of you remember on this call when our margins were 2 and 3 cents a gallon on diesel. a lot of us have gotten fat, dumb, and happy with our high margins, and we've forgotten about the importance of managing our business, managing our turns, and looking at, the profitability of all the merchandise and food and so forth that we're trying to sell. And at least, inventory does not always equal sales. Okay? Having a lot of merchandise in your store does not necessarily equal sales. And the opposite occurs as well. Having almost no inventory in your sales doesn't always equal a profitable location or a store that's turning fast. So there's a balancing act that you utilize. So critical for for your retail survival to understand that. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
There's one more slide that has our contact info on it, I believe. While we're waiting, you can submit your questions through the chat section or the Q&A, and just give a little plug for our Food and Fuel Study Tour, which is coming up next month, July 18th to the 20th in Chicago. It's, as you can imagine, one day devoted to biodiesel on the fuel part, and one day devoted to food. We're going to visit renewable energy groups. We're going to go to 2 truck stops, and then we're going to spend all day Thursday looking at food opportunities in Chicago. So a little plug for that. It's on the website in the calendar section. Just a reminder that I'm going to post the presentation slides and the video that we just took up on in the calendar section, and I'll also email it out to you guys. Questions?
Easy.
There are also on our website a bunch of related blog posts to this that Darren's written. Like, for example, he did a pretty detailed blog post on what to do with ideas and what to do with dead inventory. So just heads up, if you search for Truckstop inventory on our website in the upper right-hand corner, you can find those. All right, guys,
all right.
Thank you so much. Feel free to contact me or Darren with feedback or questions or
anything
at all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.